Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening. So, for those of you who've already seen it, you probably already know and you've already voiced your opinion about this particular series that is now playing on Netflix entitled When They See Us. And so, it is a Netflix four-part series, and I have to say it is very well put out. Um, and I think the article will go into more detail about the true timeline of events that happen. So, Netflix, When They See Us, tells the story of the Central Park Five. Here's a timeline of the real events. And so I saw this article, and after I saw the four-part series, I thought it was really well um, put out in a chronological order. And so this is out of the Esquire Gabrielle Bruni, out of the Esquire May 31st, 2019. And so from the Esquire in the late 1980s, a brutal crime shook New York City. And so I'm going to pan down and get closer to what is going on here. So it's going to give a timeline of events. So it brings you into the story gradually so you can understand. For those of you who haven't seen the movie or you're not familiar about the Central Park Five, but for those of you that are, you already know, you've seen the movie, or even before the movie, you know about the real Central Park Five and what happened. And I'm one that knows because I was able to understand during that era, and I remember seeing that whole thing play out. So, in the late 1980s, a brutal crime that shook New York City. Tricia, now I may be saying her last name a little bit off, but I believe it's Tricia Miele. She was a white, or is, I don't know if she's still doing it, but at the time she was a white banker who would become known in the press as the Central Park Jogger. And she was raped and beaten almost to death during an evening run in the city's most beloved park. So, five Black and Latino teenagers, boys aged from 14 to 16, were convicted of a horrifying assault and would serve between 6 to 13 years in prison for a crime before the real perpetrator was found. So, the case is the basis of Ava DuVernay's upcoming Netflix miniseries, which it is airing now, and it is entitled When They See Us, which debuts May 31st. Here's the timeline of the decades-long saga. So these are timelines of the actual true event when it happened. So April the 17th in 1989, a 26-year-old woman was beaten and raped in northern Central Park by a man she described as having stitches on his chin. And so you'll see me panning down. And so after her attack, the detective consulted local hospitals for young men fitting her description that she had said, and was given the name of Matias Reyes, an 18-year-old who worked at a bodega near the scene of the attack. Authorities never followed up on that lead. So, April 19th, 1989, around 9 p.m., a group of about 30 teenage boys entered Central Park from 110th Street and Fifth Avenue. Taking a southeast route, some of the boys intimidated and insulted passersby. They threw rocks and sticks, and others beat a male jogger so badly that he had to be hospitalized for 2 days. Around the same time, the 28-year-old Tricia Miele entered the park from 84th Street and Fifth Avenue for her regular after-work jog, running a path that took her northeast or northwest, that is, sorry for that. So while running the path known as 102nd Street Cross Drive, she was hit in the back of the head with a tree branch and dragged off that path, raped and beaten in an isolated section of the park, and she wouldn't be discovered for hours. And so it goes down. So let me try to get over here so I can actually get to this. So in response to the muggings and the harassment by the group of teens, police apprehended 5 boys, including Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, and brought them to the Central Park precinct. So this is an article in the paper that pretty much paints this picture of these boys being what they call a wolf pack's prey. Wolf pack, wolves, basically. And they said wolf pack's prey, Central Park horror, female jogger near death after savage attack by roving gang. And so you see the scene here. April 20th, 1989, around 1:30 a.m., passerby discovered Miele in the park. So the young woman was near death, having lost up to 80% of her blood. Police instantly connected the attack on Miele to the other less serious crimes that occurred in the park that night. By 11 p.m., investigators brought more boys who were in the park that night to the station, including Antron McCrae, Korey Wise, and Yusuf Salem. So Wise, who suffered from hearing loss and a learning disability, was 16 years old and could therefore be legally interrogated without a guardian present. The other boys were 14 and 15 years of age. But after hours of interrogation pressure for some of the city's top homicide detectives, Wise, McCrae, Richardson, Santana, gave and signed and videotaped statements confessing to being involved in an attack on Miele. Salem wrote a confession but refused to sign it and was implicated by other members of the group. The boys soon recanted, and all 5 of them reported that the police had promised that they could go home if they produced the confessions. So around April the 27th and 28th of 1989, the boys were indicted on counts including attempted murder, rape, assault, and rioting. Charged as an adult, Wise was sent to the New York's notorious Rikers Island prison while the others were taken to juvenile facilities. And so you see here, this is a picture of one of the boys, his father and his mother and some other people accompanying him. And so May 10th of 1989, after days in a coma, Miele began to regain consciousness. But due to the severity of the brain trauma she suffered, she would never be able to remember the night of her attack. Donald Trump then, at the time before he was president, he was a local real estate developer and the best-selling author of The Art of the Deal. He paid $85,000 to take out a full-page ad in all of New York's major papers, and ads implicitly responded to Miele's rape and the teens' apprehension with a call to bring back the death penalty. So June 14th of 1989, Matias Reyes forced his way into the 97th Street apartment of Lourdes Gonzalez, who was pregnant at the time and home alone with her 3 small children. He raped and murdered her while her children listened in the other room. So June 5th of 1989, Reyes forced his way into another woman's apartment, also on the Manhattan's Upper East Side. After raping her, he was caught by her doorman and a neighbor. DNA evidence linked him to the other rapes, including Gonzalez's murder. Reyes would go on to plead guilty and be sentenced to 33 years to life, but he attacked 5 women since April 19th. And so here he is pictured here. This is Matias Reyes, the actual guy who committed the rape So, August 18, 1990, after a 6-week-long trial, McRae, Salem, and Santana were convicted of the attack of Miele despite numerous inconsistencies between their initial confessions and the facts of the case. None of the five, save Wise, who was brought to the crime scene by investigators, were able to properly pinpoint the location in the park where Miele was attacked. So they were wrong about the time of the attack and incorrectly described what she was wearing as well. So most strikingly, none of the DNA matched a sample taken from Miele's rape kit. So still, they were sentenced anyway without no DNA, no match, no evidence, and not really having a pinpoint on where the crime scene took place. They were still sentenced 5 to 10 years imprisonment and the maximum penalty given to their juvenile status. So December 11th, 1990, Korey Wise, Kevin Richardson were convicted, and Richardson was sentenced to 5 years to 10 years, while Korey, charged as an adult, was sentenced 5 to 15 years. June 12th, 2002, New York Times reported that the known rapist, a now 31-year-old Matias Reyes, confessed to the Central Park 5 jogger attack. Reyes had encountered Wise when the final member of the five still was incarcerated in Auburn prison in late 2001. The two had met once before and had gotten into an argument over a television in Rikers in 1989. Their friendly second conversation left Reyes feeling guilty for the fact that Wise was in prison for a crime Reyes had committed. And he knew he committed, of course. He confessed that he had raped Miele and that, as in all of his other attacks, he had acted alone. And so this is the actual Central Park 5 jogger, Miele. So December 19, 2002, after the DA office investigation matched Reyes' DNA to the semen from Miele's rape kit, and Reyes gave a detailed confession that, unlike the Central Park 5, closely hewed to the known facts of the case. A judge overturned the 5 convictions, and by this time, Wise had been released, and the only member of the 5 in prison was Raymond Santana, who was incarcerated on unrelated drug charges. He was freed soon after, as his lengthy sentence was predicted on his status as a repeat offender. So, with his initial conviction overturned, Santana resentenced as a first time offender and released with time served. So, April 8th, 2003, Tricia Miele, which is the woman you see pictured up here, who was the actual Central Park 5 jogger, and she's doing a public speaking. She also wrote a book saying, "I am the jogger." So Tricia Miele, whose name had largely been withheld by the press as customary for sexual assault victims, came forward with her identity in a memoir about her recovery. "I am the Central Park jogger." So January 27th, 2003, the New York City Police Department completed an internal review of its management of the Central Park 5 jogger case, and the department found no wrongdoing on the part of its officers, and despite the plethora of new evidence and vacated convictions, maintained that the Central Park 5 were likely guilty. So June 19, 2014, after a more than a decade-long battle, New York City settled out a civil rights lawsuit brought on by the Central Park 5 for $40 million. Actually, I heard it was 41 million. So that's pretty much it, and that is the real. You're seeing the real boys, or well, they're not boys, they're men, the real men that were once boys that were involved in the Central Park 5. So Korey Wise is the one with the W and on the red hat, and then you see all of the other 4, and Vernay I think if I said her name correctly, the writer or the person that did the Netflix four-part series is the woman with the glasses. Okay. And so I thought this was pretty well laid out the way they chronologically set this article up. So I thought I would do that first. And you can see the original um, article out of that. I believe it's a Manhattan article about the Central Park horror. And I remember this because in '89 was when I graduated high school myself. So I remember when that happened. And now I am going to move over to this other story. And hopefully it'll let me move over to this other story. Let me see. Okay, so When They See Us reveals the heartbreaking truth about Korey Wise. So I was reading another article about Korey Wise because he was the one that was tried as an adult out of the five because he was 16 at the time. So he was the oldest of the Central Park Five that has a particularly devastating story. So when you see the four-part series, it's really sad and heartbreaking what this young man had to go through. And here he is pictured here. This was when he was being indicted on a crime he didn't commit. So Korey Wise is the oldest of the so-called Central Park Five. And as seen in the Netflix miniseries When They See Us, Korey was tried and sentenced as an adult in the Central Park jogger case. Korey's charges have since been overturned and he has become an activist. So every last part of watching Netflix miniseries When They See Us is devastating. So the series, which was created and directed by Ava DuVernay, Selma 13 follows as a true story of the Central Park Five, five Black and Latino teens, Korey Wise, Yusef Salem, Antron McCray, Raymond Santana, and Kevin Richardson, who were wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for a brutal assault and rape of a 28-year-old female jogger in Central Park. So this is pretty much an advertisement, but I believe it had something in there. It might have something in there about this article. But as the viewers have watched the four-part episode series, however, one character story has struck them as especially heartbreaking, and that is the story of Korey Wise. An unexpected interrogation when the police collecting suspects in the 1989 Central Park jogger case, Korey Wise's friend, 15-year-old Yusuf Salem, was brought in for questioning. So, in a show of support, Korey decided to accompany him. So this turned out to be a grave mistake, however, as the police ended up pulling him into the interrogation room as well. At 16, Korey was the oldest of the boys who would eventually become known as the Central Park Five, one of them out of the five. And because of his age, he was legally allowed to be questioned by detectives without supervision of a parent or guardian. So combine this with the fact that Korey struggled with hearing loss and learning disability. And then the teen was especially vulnerable to the pressures of the detectives' allegedly aggressive questioning. So there's no Central Park Five, it was four plus one. And that was the statement that Korey Wise made. By the end of his interrogation, Korey had given both a written and videotaped confession. The details in his statement didn't match the details in the actual crime. And Korey would later say that the police, led by head of the Manhattan DA sex crime, Linda Fairstein, coerced him into submitting a false confession. So, serving time in adult prisons, despite the lack of a solid evidence, all five boys were ultimately found guilty of various charges of rape and assault in the Central Park Five jogger case. But unlike other four teens who were tried as minors and sentenced 5 to 10 years in a youth correctional facility, where they could be held until they were 21, Korey was sentenced 5 to 15 years, all of which where he would spend in adult prison. And so this is the actor that is playing Korey Wise. And so actor Gerald Jerome plays Korey Wise in the Netflix miniseries When They See Us. And so the teenager was initially sent to Rikers Prison, the infamous New York City jail, and as is shown in the fourth and final episode, When They See Us, it was a rough time for him. Just as a kid thrust into a group of adult criminals, Korey was the subject of great violence, abuse during his time there and in other federal prisons. He also spent several long periods in his incarceration locked away in solitary confinement. So, one of the things that really struck me was that Korey said to me, there is no Central Park 5. It is 4 plus 1, or it was 4 plus 1. And no one has told that story. So, When They See Us director Ava DuVernay told Town and Country, I think it's important for people to understand the depths of what it means to be incarcerated in adult prisons in this country. Eventually, Korey met murderer and serial rapist Matias Reyes in prison, and Matias confessed to being the actual lone perpetrator of the Central Park jogger rape. A DNA test, along with Matias' knowledge of the details of the crime, confirmed his guilt, and in 2002, Korey was released from prison, but by that time he had served 12 years in an adult prison, starting from age 16. So, looking for the justice after wrongful incarceration. So, there is also books about this story. So, after Korey was released from prison, and then District Attorney Robert M. Morgenthau vacated all the Central Park Five's charges. Three of the men, Antron, Kevin, Raymond, filed a lawsuit against the city of New York for malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, emotional distress as well. So it took more than a decade and the election of a new mayor, Bill de Blasio, but New York's finally settled the lawsuit for 41 million, and that's what I originally heard, that it was 41 million, not 40 million. So, and as the man who had wrongfully served the most time in prison, Korey Wise received the largest portion of the settlement, which was $12.2 million. And so at the end of the day, however, Korey still served more than a decade in prison as an innocent man. And he was a youth at the time. And he knows that those are the years that the settlement won't give him back. And you can forgive, but you won't forget, he says in Sarah and Ken Burns' 2012 documentary, The Central Park Five. You won't forget what you lost. No money could bring back that time and bring back bring the time back. So no money could bring the life that was missing or the time that was taken away. Where Korey Wise is today, so this is Korey Wise now. Pictures and the premiere of the Netflix series When They See Us in New York City. He still resides in New York City, so Korey Wise still lives there in New York City, where he works as a public speaker and criminal justice activist. In 2015, he donated $190,000 to the University of Colorado chapter of the Innocence Project, which then changed its name to the Korey Wise Innocent Project at Colorado Law in his honor. To this day, Korey's friend Yusuf says he still feels pain for unintentionally bringing Korey into the Central Park jogger case, and the release of the Netflix When They See Us only amplifies that feeling. So we were in paradise compared to the hell that Korey Wise was in. We had all gone through hell, but when I saw this series, I immediately realized that we were in paradise compared to the hell that Korey was in. Yusuf recently said in an interview with the New York Times, I went to jail and I was able to get a college degree, and he never got an opportunity to breathe. Despite all of that Korey has been through, however, the now 46-year-old keeps a surprisingly positive attitude, something that Jarrell Jerome, the actor who plays Korey Wise in When They See Us, noticed immediately upon meeting him. So I was terrified to meet him just because this is the man I'm going to portray in this mini series. And I don't know how to speak to somebody who lived a life like that because I've never met anyone like that, Jarrell told Newsweek in a May interview. So the second I met him, he took his chains off and put it around my neck and he said, "You're Korey Wise now." That put everything in perspective for me about the kind of man he is. So it's all strength, it's all power, and he's all bright. So that's pretty much the article. And I thought it was really positive, and it was refreshing to hear that he's doing good things despite all of the horror that he lived at such a young age. So this is Korey Wise, and I think a lot of young people could take a lesson from this whole four-part series. It was excellent by Ava DuVernay, and I really wanted to speak on it because I just doing these articles pretty much was easy to go through the timeline of the events that happened, what occurred, and who was all involved in it. And so I think this is a very, 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 very um, important story for a lot of young African American and Hispanic males, or Latino males, and African American males, especially to look at because it's very heartbreaking, especially what this young guy had to suffer. But you know, I don't know. What do you think about this story? For those of you that's seen it, how did it make you feel? What I recently discovered is that the actual person who was the prosecutor on the case, they actually wanted to run her off of social media because there were a lot of people that once they saw this four-part mini-series, they were not happy about her reaction to even to this day. She still accuses these five innocent males of committing a crime that they never even participated in, that they never had any knowledge of even doing. They didn't do it. They weren't even there. And so she's still, even to this day, holding to her same sentiment as accusing them. I read that somewhere. And so, yeah, I thought that it was showing scenes of the actual story. So up right here is clips of the Central Park 5. So with that being said, I'm going to let this video go and give your thoughts and your feedback. Do you feel that they should have gotten a lot more than just 41 million? It's not a money thing, that they should not only have gotten money, but they should have also gotten more from out of what they had experienced. You know, it just was really heartbreaking, but you have to see this four-part series. You're looking at clips of it right now. And so I thought it was very truth telling about, does it open doors about the conversation about the justice system, how it fails people of color. So with that being said, I'm going to let this video go. It opens a lot of discussion, talks about, the justice system. It talks about, how it either if it's for the people of color or if it's against the people of color. These are issues, or it even talks about issues around the, I don't know if you know, there's a book, and some people probably know already, but there's a book called The New Jim Crow. Actually, looking at the title right now. It's called The New Jim Crow. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's about mass incarceration in the age of colorblindness, and it's by Michelle Alexander with a new foreword by Cornell West. And so this pretty much will put uh, more elaboration on the justice system when it comes to people who are African American, especially, and people of color in general, so that you can see, is it either for the people or more against the people. It also expounds on why there is a lack of trust in the justice system when it comes to people that are in category or categorized as Black or African American or people who are Latino, that the justice system has failed a lot of people and has put people behind bars who don't belong there, or has pretty much given up on folks. So I think this is a really good miniseries. So I would say to you too, I wanted to add, if you do see this, you'll also see Donald Trump, and he is pictured in real time in that movie back when he put out the $85,000 ad to bring back the death penalty because he felt that these boys deserved the death penalty, even though now now in hindsight you see that these boys were exonerated and um, the real rapist came forward and admitted the crime. And if you look at who is running things, and you kind of see it enrages people. So, and then just the whole thing about the justice system, it's been a long battle for people of color, as long as I can remember. So with that being said, I'm going to let this video go. Please feel free to uh, express what you feel. I even heard people feel like they thought that these boys really did it. I don't think they ever did anything wrong, except they were at the wrong place, as they say, at the wrong time. And they were innocent and they didn't know what to do, and they were inexperienced about law and what these people were doing to them. They were young, they were teenagers, they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, most definitely. So, with that being said, this last article was by Heather Finn out of GH. And so that was June, it was posted June 5th, 2019. The other article was a timeline, and it was out of the Esquire by Gabrielle Brunet, and it was posted May 31st, 2019. And so, just sad. It was very, very, very um, controversial, this movie, and it is definitely a talking piece for conversation. Well, that being said, finally, I must go. Thanks for listening.